Broadcasting the information the mainstream media won't touch. This is The Richie Allen Show in association with DavidIke.com.
So I hope you've had a good old Wednesday. Hope you're in good form. And as usual, thank you very much for choosing the programme. Big shout out to my friend Stephen Lash, who's a Mancunian and a friend of the programme's. Stephen is listening to the programme in Cordoba in Andalusia, which I know very well, of course, having spent many years in Andalusia. Not based in Cordoba, of course, but based on the Costa del Sol. Stephen, hope you're well, and thanks very much for sending that tweet. Delighted to hear from you. Right, so let's crack on with a bit of news. Not too much news. A couple of things I want to tell you about. Jean-Claude Juncker, the president of the European Commission, has said the UK will soon regret leaving the EU. He told the European Parliament that Brexit would be a sad, tragic moment for the European Union, but that the 27-member union would move on. He said Brexit isn't the future of Europe. It is not the be-all and the end-all, he said. You want to hear what he said? I won't subject you to a lot of it, just a little bit of it. This is Jean-Claude Juncker today, courtesy of the BBC.
March 29th, 2019. That will be the date where the United Kingdom will leave the European Union. This will be a very sad and tragic moment in our history. We will always regret this, but... And I think that you will regret it as well soon, if I might say. Nonetheless, we have to respect the will of the British people. But we are going to make progress. We will keep moving. We will move on because Brexit isn't everything. It's not the future of Europe. It's not the be-all and end-all.
Now, in the same debate, the former leader of UKIP, Nigel Farage, said that the European Union had learned nothing from Brexit and was ploughing full steam ahead with its agenda, which we've, I suppose, covered so much on this programme. There's no point in me labouring the fact. By 2025, Juncker wants complete fiscal, economic and political union in Europe. He wants a superstate, one country effectively. You know, basically absorbing every sovereign state in the or on the continent. That's what he wants. And it's interesting he said there about respecting the will of the people, as we spoke about last night in last night's opening salvo. The evidence is they have no intention of respecting the will of the people at all, because their own rules are being broken. The rules that there must be a deal at the end of 2 years. If there isn't, the UK would revert to World Trade Organization trading conditions. But they've broken that rule, of course, and they've already begun to implement this transition period, which I mentioned on the programme yesterday. People like Alistair Darling and all the other Remoners are now pushing to be as long as 5, even 10 years long, if necessary, which of course would mean the UK would never leave the EU at all. More on that, of course, in future programmes. Now, George Hook is an Irish radio presenter who's also known for being a rugby union pundit. Very outspoken. He's been described as a shock jock. I wouldn't use the term shock jock myself. He's been around a long time, has George. He's a bit like Marmite. But then again, everybody who makes radio, presents radio, is Marmite, I suppose. You either love or like what they do, or you don't like it. So last Friday, I was away, completing my break. Hook broadcast his show on Ireland's Newstalk radio station, national station. As always, it's a daily programme. And something he said in that show got him into a little bit of trouble. He was reporting on the story of a 19-year-old woman who alleges that she was raped by a former member of the British Olympic swimming team. This is in court at the moment. Okay? George Hook, the presenter, posed an open question concerning the possibility that sometimes women might put themselves in harm's way. Now, I'll play you the segment in a second. Since the broadcast, the progressive Twitterati, as we've dubbed them, the Irish media, other broadcasters have called for Hook to be fired. And incredibly, I learned this morning that a letter signed by 20 of his colleagues at Newstalk, 20 of his fellow workmates, signed a letter and handed it to the station's manager, calling for him to be fired, saying that misogyny was unacceptable. Yes, his teammates, his workmates have asked for him to be sacked, right? So do you want to hear what he actually said? Remember, he was commenting on the story of the 19-year-old woman who alleges she was raped by a former member of the British Olympic swimming team. This has been hysterical over the last few days. So he must have said something truly heinous, you would have thought. Well, make up your own mind. This is what Hook had to say.
Another story today was a girl who was raped in the United Kingdom by a former member of the British Olympic swim team. Now, she was passed around, went the story, and apparently she went to bed with one guy, and then he goes out and another guy comes in. She doesn't want to have relations with the second guy, but he forces himself upon her. Awful. But when you then look deeper into the story, you have to ask certain questions. Why does a girl who just meets a fella in a bar go back to a hotel room? She's only just barely met him. She has no idea of his health conditions. She has no idea who he is. She has no idea of what dangers he might pose. But modern-day social activity means that she goes back with him, then is surprised when somebody else comes into the room and rapes her. Should she be raped? Of course she shouldn't. Is she entitled to say no? Absolutely. Is the guy who came in a scumbag? Certainly. Should he go to jail? Of course. All those things. But is there no blame now to the person who puts themselves in danger? You then, of course, read that she passed out in the toilet, and when she woke up, the guy was trying to rape her. There is personal responsibility, because it's your daughter and it's my daughter. And what determines the daughter who goes out, gets drunk, passes out and is with strangers in a room, and the daughter that goes out, stays halfway sober and comes home? I don't know. I wish I knew. I wish I knew what the secret of parenting is. But there is a point of responsibility.
Yeah, so what do you think of that? Tweet at Richie Allen Show. The upshot of that is Hook has been lambasted from pillar to post in the Republic of Ireland by every feminist group in the country, by every women's rights group in the country, by various people who run women's shelters in the country, by every journalist in the country, by every vox pop. And a vox pop, by the way, is when you take a microphone onto the streets and you ask people what do they think. Everybody thinks that Hook is a misogynist. He's a victim blamer, apparently. He hates women and he's blaming the victim, apparently, and he has to be fired. Incredibly, 20 of his own colleagues, I have to make this point again, I said it a minute ago, went to the management of the station and said they wanted him out. He hates women. He's blaming the victim. Is he? Is he? Why are women so outraged by it? Are women outraged, or is the progressive Twitterati driving a false narrative, whipping up a storm when there isn't really one there? Doesn't he pose a fair question? Why get rat arse pissed out of your brains and wake up in a strange room? You're not asking for it. He said this clearly. You don't deserve this. He said this clearly as well. And the bastard who did it should be charged and locked up if found guilty. He said this as well. He clearly said nobody is asking for it. Nobody deserves that to happen to them. The question he did pose is, why put yourself at risk? Why can't you go out and drink moderately? Be a bit more aware of where you are and who you're with. Is that victim blaming? Why can't he say that? I'm 42 years old. I don't have any children. Please God, we will have children someday. I can imagine, and if you're a parent, you feel free to jump on me and say, Richie, you're out of order. I can imagine when the girl heals, and maybe you don't ever heal after a sexual assault, but when she gets her life back in order, I can imagine her father, if he's alive, Hopefully he's alive. She's only 19. He's probably alive. I can imagine her father having a word with her and saying, why would you do that? Why would you do that? Why, not to blame you for what happened, but why would you get so catatonic that you are unable to protect yourself from the scumbag who took you back to the hotel and literally fed you to his mates? Is that victim blaming? I wouldn't have thought so. I wouldn't have thought so. It's a media created hysteria. So I was wondering, I was thinking, I wonder if there's something more to this. I wonder if old George, 76-year-old George, has any enemies. Who might want to see the back of George Hook? So I did a bit of digging, and 10 days before George did the rape story, he covered the HPV Gardasil vaccine injured girl's story. He did. And he said this.
The HSE, this huge organisation of thousands of employees with budgets running into millions and billions, are being apparently defeated by a bunch of Irish mothers, so the vaccine has dropped. Am I happy that the vaccine take-up has dropped? No, I am not. But then I hear the failed chief executive of the failed HSE, Tony O'Brien, on the radio describe these mothers as emotional terrorists. How dare he? How absolutely dare he call mothers who care for their children, who watch them in agony and pain, how dare he call them terrorists? If we had a Minister of Health in Simon Harris who wasn't in political nappies and in a job way above his talents, if he had a shred of courage, which the great party Fine Gael seems singularly lacking in, O'Brien wouldn't have a job today. O'Brien would be sacked. He'd be taking his belongings home in a cardboard box for calling mothers of Ireland emotional terrorists.
There you go. There you go. So he's basically taken on the pharmaceutical companies, the pharmaceutical lobby, the head of the HSC, O'Brien, whom he mentioned and whom was mentioned last night by the amazing Anna Cannon. And while he said there that, he doesn't, have anti-vaccine opinions, he said that it is an outrage that mothers of young girls who are grievously ill, grievously damaged, are being called emotional terrorists by a man. He recommended that man be fired, and he practically demanded that the government either force him to resign or to fire him. These pharmaceutical companies, by the way, spend massive money with Irish newspapers and Irish media, including the commercial radio station Newstalk, which he works for. I wonder. Because I've been around a long time, and I've worked in places, and I've worked with people who, radio stations and television companies are full of egos. We all have egos. I have an ego. Maybe people who make radio programs have more inflated egos than the average man or woman. Maybe we do. Maybe you need to have a bit of an opinion of yourself to do what it is that you do on a daily basis. I can't believe the 20 people in his own company wanted him fired for what he said about the young woman currently going through the court case about the rape, where he basically said, we need to take care of ourselves a bit more maybe when we go out. So he took on the HSE, took on the Irish government, took on pharma, and I'm willing to bet, and I have no proof of this whatsoever, that heads got together after the anti-HSE rant about the vaccines. Heads got together and said, the first opportunity we get to get rid of that bastard, we take it. And on the Friday, George does the rant about, it wasn't even a rant, let's take care of ourselves. When do we take some personal responsibility? There's a massive media hysteria about this, which has gone on from Friday to today. Today is Wednesday. It hasn't left the pages of the Irish newspapers or Irish radio stations. Everybody and their grandmother is demanding that Hook be fired and never be on the airwaves again. 10 days after he said it is unacceptable that Irish women are called emotional terrorists for challenging Gardasil. Now, if Gardasil is allowed to be challenged, if these women are allowed to have their day in court, if they get an inquiry, this will have devastating consequences for those who pushed the vaccine, those who administered the vaccine, and of course the companies that sell it. You're going to tell me that there's no relationship between those two stories? Yeah, I don't think so.